All right. The sign says that we are live, but I know that it may take a second to roll through. I see
Yeah.
some comments already coming in. Everybody, we are running a skosh late. No big deal. Some technical difficulties on my end. But
It's my fault. I take the rap for that, man. My fault. Sorry.
all right, I want to take this moment while we're making sure everything's coming over to introduce our guest. It is Mr. Scott Rouse, one of the great body language experts I've had on before. And he is continuing what I hope to be a great theme with this live stream. I've had Chase Hughes on, who both of us know, and in the past, and Chase did a fantastic job. So if you guys like this content, please subscribe because I have more coming. As a matter of fact, next week I have Mark Bowden coming on too, and I think Scott knows Mark pretty well.
Yeah, tell him I said hey.
I definitely will. Hopefully, you'll be watching.
Oh yeah, I will be. I will be. I'm not even putting that together.
And I have two more FBI agents coming on, and there's a lot of great content in there right now. So please check it all out. And the whole purpose of this live stream is for you guys. I want to get questions from you. I've had Scott on in the past and tried to ask really good questions if I could, but you probably will have questions yourself. And I see people rolling in. I've got a Heather Lake in here, Kelly Martin, and Kelly is a PI. I believe your wife is a PI, Scott?
Yep. Amber's a PI.
Awesome. Speaking of PIs in Nashville, I had Sheila Wysocki on.
Oh, I don't think I know her.
Really? She's out of Nashville, internationally known PI.
I bet Amber does. I don't think I've met her before.
Yeah, she's the one. Her roommate was murdered, and she's helped solve the mystery on the cold case.
Wow. Okay, didn't know that.
And we have oh boy, I always worry about names. Rudrani Devi. I hope I'm saying it correctly.
I know her. I went to high school with Ru.
Okay, did I say it right?
Yeah, Rudrani Devi actually.
Okay, well, fantastic. All right, so folks, as you think of questions, please jump in. And I'm going to start out because everybody's on lockdown and quarantined or pretending to be and watching The Tiger King.
Oh, yeah.
I watched part of it. I haven't gotten through. I've got through most of the first episode. But there's a lot of rumors going around the internet that not only is he crazy, but the woman he's in prison for hiring a hit person to kill may have killed her first husband.
Yeah.
What do you think?
That's what it looks like. She's doing. She's saying all the things that if she didn't do it, then she has what's called guilty knowledge. She's showing all the things that show she knows something about it. For example, when they talk about it, she laughs. If I ask you if you murdered your wife or somebody that you knew or your enemy, and you were describing, what happened to you or something, or what could have happened, you wouldn't be laughing about it. You'd be like, listen, man, I didn't do it. No, I don't know. I don't know how they did it. I mean, they fit into lions or tigers or something. I have no idea, but you wouldn't be laughing about it. There'd be nothing funny about it because you'd be taking it seriously. And she's doing the classic deflection of like it's so crazy that I would do something like that. But those are one of the things. I'm not saying she did, but I'm saying from what I saw, boy, it sure looks like it. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the future something pops up where she's questions about that again. I don't know if that investigation is over, but if it's not, they should open it back up. So
you mentioned deflections, and that makes me think of a couple things. Is it common to use like over explanations, like you just said right there, like, oh, it'd be completely crazy for anybody to ever think that I could possibly do something like that? Is that kind of on that line?
That's one type. Sometimes you'll have somebody they'll take you in a completely different direction as you're talking to them. You'll ask them a question. Did you go to were you in the car that night when whatever it was happened? They'll say, you know what, let me say this about that. There are a lot of cars that I've been in that I go a lot of times, and his car is not one I like hanging out in. And they'll go on and tell you all kinds of things, but they won't tell you if they won't give you a yes or no answer.
That sounds like a presidential debate.
Well, I was going to say the master of that is that Jeff. Is it Jeff Weiner? What's his first name? What his name is Weiner?
Andrew.
Anthony. That's what it is. Anthony. Oh man, that guy's a master of that. So if you want to learn how to do that, just watch him. Watch those videos because he just never answers the questions.
I have a question on that. So essentially, he is Well, he's into perverted things, and he's a politician. Isn't that redundant?
That's pretty much the same thing, I think.
At least
Either way you look at it, for a lot of them.
All right. Well, hey, I dropped some names earlier. Chase Hughes, Mark Bowden. Do you go hang out with these guys? Do you talk with other body language people?
Yeah, it's interesting because there are about 5 of us that kind of stick together, that keep in touch all the time. Greg and Greg Hartley, who's my business partner, and writing a book with Greg actually, and Chase, of course, Chase Hughes, and then Mark. Mark's kind of the Joe Rogan of body language, and like, for example, it'll be a couple weeks ago. Chase had run into, he was doing a thing in Prague, it was Florida. He'd been in Prague.
Orlando. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he'd met up with Mark, but he was there with Joe Navarro doing whatever the thing was, but he ran into Mark. Mark was just happened to be in town.
And Robert Dreek.
Yeah. So I started getting these, pictures from all of them. Said, hey man, I wish you were here, and it was, what else? And then 30 minutes later, I get somebody's trying to FaceTime me, and it's like 1 or 2 in the morning, and it's Chase, So we I'll get a funny video from one of those guys whenever we'll run into each other. Then we'll send the other ones videos. Like Greg, I sent one to Greg when Mark was in town. I was in Nashville a while back, and so we'll do stuff like that and just send each other videos and stuff. But they're not a whole lot of. This sounds horrible, of us who know each other that can, or there are a lot of body language experts, and there aren't as many. It's hard to get somebody to talk to. Nobody wants to go hang out with you. Nobody wants to go, hey, let's go get a coffee and see what you think I might be thinking. So you get a lot of that. So when somebody comes in town or you get to hang out with somebody who can speak your language, that's why Greg and I, it's like every time we get together, we never shut up the whole time. We got a lot to do and we get it all done, but it's just, we never shut up because we talk, you don't have anybody to talk to about this, except each other.
Well, you're nerds. Your body language nerds.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of research that goes with it. So but if you see Greg though, he's not a nerd. And well, I think Mark and I might be, Chase and Greg aren't, Oh,
Chase is a nerd.
He is, but he doesn't look like you'd never be.
Well, it's not a matter of looks. A nerd is somebody who obsesses about a subject to such a degree that they think about it all the time, and they read every piece of literature on it and eat it, breathe it. So that's a nerd.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then put Hartley in that pile too. So I guess we're all hardcore nerds. We've all got every time you talk, did you read so and so, or we give each other books, those kind of things.
Now, do you sit there and critique each other's work or other people's work? Like you watch somebody, do a video breakdown and go,
well,
I can't believe that.
Well, I can't believe you're asking me that. 2 days ago, right? So I get a call, I get a text from Chase, and he says, hey man, you got a couple of minutes? And it wasn't like, hey, what's going on? So I said, yeah, give me a buzz. So we talked. He said, hey, man, I got something to talk to you about. And I was like, well, what is it? He FaceTimed me. He's like, that video you put out talking about the differences in fear and how fear is the humorous or a small version, tiny version of surprise. And we went over the different things that I missed in that. He's like, you missed this, and this. I'm like, dude, I had no earthly idea that I missed these things. So that's another thing from talking to each other. We learn stuff from each other and not afraid to call up and go, you know what? And like the other day when I spelled quarantine wrong, Greg called. He said, hey, man, I think we spelled quarantine wrong. It was we spelled it wrong. Not, dude, you spelled this wrong. It was like, I think we spelled quarantine wrong. So
was it you who had the CUARINTINE? Because somebody had that.
No. I put an E where the second A went. I kept doing it. You told me that too. Remember, you pointed out, you're like, hey man, you spelled quarantine wrong. I think it was you. You did it and somebody else did it.
I saw somebody else do it too. I guess everybody is. They're going stir crazy and getting the letters mixed up.
Well, I'm just a horrible speller, But yeah, so we do connect, we do hang out, and it's good that you can say something to each other without bumming the other one out, because you actually learn something from the other one. As high end as the stuff we deal in is, we still learn things from each other just by hanging out.
Well, that's cool, because I'd worry that there would be a competitive situation in it. But I guess there's so few of you on the ground that you really aren't going to trip over each other for jobs.
It's more of a camaraderie than a competition. I mean, I don't like if there's a gig that I got this. This is about 3 months ago. I got a gig in China, and it was a whole lot. It was a whole lot of money, and I was like, wow, I got to go. And then something came up, and I couldn't go. You know, and I think it was the coronavirus. I see that coming, and it was happening in China. So I wanted to go, but my wife sort of put the hammer down and said, "You're not going to China." So I called Mark, said, "Hey man, I got this gig in China. I'm not going to do it. Do you want it?" He's like, "Yeah, I'll do it." I'm like, "Great." So we'll pass stuff off to each other, or like when I'm suggesting people for you to talk to, you know, for interviews and things. So we really don't. We're so glad to talk and see each other and be able to talk about what's happening. Nobody's competitive, you know. That I'm aware of. That these guys aren't. The people we're talking about aren't. You know, everybody's into the other people, so want to help them.
Yeah, and I've hung out with Chase a bit, and he just gets excited.
Yeah. Oh, he's all up in it, man.
Now, when you guys are in person, what do you do besides make ridiculous videos like you're in a fake fight?
Mostly. Oh, one thing Greg and I do is we always, every time we go, if we're doing something, we're either writing something or doing something for the course or one of those types of things, we'll go out and eat, and that's the best time because we'll sit there and watch couples and decide whether it's you know, is this their first time out? Or is this, well, I'll tell you why it's their first time out because this and this and this, and the other one will go, yeah, you're right. But what about this? So you'll try. And then finally, if you can't stand, excuse me, is this your first date by any chance? Well, yes, it is. It's we haven't been in. Okay. Just wondering. Just saw you then. Good luck. You know,
so it's like a horrible jury panel.
Yeah. So it's a lot of that. Like when Chase and I were hanging out when he was here in Nashville, it was all we did was talk about, was talk about research and talk about where'd you get that? How'd you learn about that? What about this? Where'd you get that? And Hartley always has these great stories because he ran the Sears School, you know, and so he's got these great stories, and you're just like, holy smoke. And no matter what your situation is, if you're coming out from talking to an embezzler, if you're talking to somebody else that's done something they shouldn't have done, or you're trying to get information about something, he's got a story that matches that, or that just is so much better than that. Or one that you can learn something from. Go, here's what happened with, and these guys are he's talking about terrorists. You know, it's like, oh, okay, yeah. Let me tell you about what the terrorists do, Greg. I have no, you know. So
I would have a rough time, especially with cultural differences and things like that.
Yeah. But you know, trained to do that. You know.
Sure. Got some questions coming in. One Rudrani.
Yeah.
Could laughing sometimes be a sign of nervousness or shyness?
Yeah, it could be like part of the wall you throw up when you're trying to be. You may be a little bit nervous, so you'll laugh. Speaking of culturally, the Japanese the problem if I go talk to a company and they've got a group of people that are like an international company, and I explain to them that sometimes they'll have problems with an international company because there'll be Japanese people getting ready to go to the meeting, and they're all going to be in the same meeting place. And you'll have Germans, and you'll have Americans, and you'll have, you know, French people, and they're all in different spots of the room. But when the Japanese look over and look at the Americans, they'll laugh some because they're nervous. And the Americans go, "What's that guy laughing about?" And the Germans look over the Americans and go, "Yeah, look at those Americans over there making fun of the Japanese." And then we'll look back at the Germans, and the Germans are going like this, you know, like, the dang Germans. So you've got all these really weird, you know, this juxtaposition of cultures, you know, against each other, and it makes a really interesting. But the Japanese, so they'll laugh a lot, or they'll smile a lot when actually they're just embarrassed, or they may be nervous. So it's really common for people to laugh when they're nervous.
Well, isn't their culture all about face too, as well as the Chinese? It's very, very important. So by their laughing, it's not quite subservient, but it's showing a deep respect in a way. Like, I'm laughing. You make me happy. It's meant to be non-threatening.
Yeah. And in America, they get you shot if you do it to the wrong person. So
especially in your neck of the woods, right?
Yeah. Especially, well, anywhere really nowadays, you know.
All right. I've got a question from Kelly Martin. Hi, Scott. Have you watched the codes President Trump puts out to acknowledge Q? I'm guessing Q is quarantine. I'm not sure.
No, there's this thing going around, and I don't know what Q is, but I've been seeing it lately, like on Twitter, and everybody's like something. I don't know if you get TikTok. It's for kids, but okay, let me tell you about this since I brought up TikTok. TikTok is this it's like 15-second videos where you watch and say, and you put up any video you want. Mostly it's for kids, but these people put on cats that sound like they're talking, and those are the ones that I look for and put in my favorites and collect them. Having said that, Kelly, I'm not sure what that is yet. I asked my wife about that last night, and she went, "Oh, we were going to sleep." And she said, "No, we don't have enough time to explain it to you." I was like, "Is it good?" And she said, "I don't know, but I'll explain it to you later." So I haven't talked to her about it. So apparently Q is something that I don't know. I'm not sure what it is, but it's some big secret of something. That's a good question though, because I'll find out about it. But I never noticed any of these things. People were talking about Q.
Yeah, I'm not sure, and I'll have to ask Chase too, because Chase is into like deep hidden codes and things like that.
Yeah.
On that note, though, you're watching these briefings, I guess on occasion. What do you see? Is he being relatively truthful, not truthful, deceptive? What is he?
I think when you're dealing with somebody when you're dealing with that personality type, everything's going to be bumped up a little bit. It's going to be exaggerated. So, and it happens with most people with that personality type, and that's fine. But I think he's telling the truth. He's just telling what he knows, but he's got to look like the guy in charge. And I'm not sure we know that much about what's going on. I can be completely wrong. There's a buddy of mine, Omar Hamada. He's a doctor. He can tell you all about this stuff, and he can tell you whether this stuff is true or not. I have no clue whatsoever about the specifics. So as I'm watching this, I'm trying to decide. I can tell when somebody's thinks that he's saying something he shouldn't be, or saying something that isn't correct, and they'll go back and correct it. But other than that, I'm not seeing that he's doing anything. Nobody's going, "Oh no, it's geez, he's lying," and I'm not seeing anything on there that shows he's being deceitful. I'm not seeing that at all. I think he's worried. I think he's worried about all that, not just from a political standpoint, but I think he's actually worried about what's going on. Those are the things I'm seeing. The expressions that show you, there's a lot going on there about he's concerned. And concerned I think he really is concerned about people, about the American people. And I think a lot of them are, and you see that with most of the people that are talking about this. So
what do you think of Fauci?
I think he's not good at public speaking, but so he may look a little bit nervous, but he must be the guy. They wouldn't be dealing with him is what I'm thinking. At this point, I've seen so much of that. I'm trying not to watch it, because it seems like it's the same thing every time I turn the TV on. So it's just like, geez, we're trying to quarantine and stay out of the virus's way. And it's just, I'm kind of tired of that.
Well, I'm not going to lay you up the hook, because Diane Wilbur's asking, can you comment on the body language of key politicians that you've seen during this pandemic?
A lot of worry, not a whole lot of panic yet. Some of them give that hint of panic, and on both sides is what I'm saying. But it's mostly concern, because they're concerned with themselves. You can tell that they're concerned that they're there among other people. You can see, if you really pay attention to watch them look around. If you'll look at these days, as they're talking to people and answering questions and things, they're moving a lot slower than they usually move. It sounds a little odd, but for me, they look like they're moving a lot slower. To everyone else, it may look normal, but their movements are a lot slower. There's a whole lot. You have a whole lot of inner dialogue going on up here as they're answering these questions and dealing with things on a usual situations. But right now, they're having to watch every word they say and pay close attention to the way they look and the way they sound as they're delivering this, so they don't scare everybody to death and we all start panicking or something. I think I'm seeing just a touch of a lot of concern, and just not panic yet, but geez, a lot of, we don't know what's going on here.
Dare I say humility on occasion?
I don't know. I haven't seen much humility up, on the political, in politicians, but maybe some, but I haven't really seen. I haven't been looking for that, but I really haven't seen that. I'm looking for panic is what I'm zeroing in on right now, so I'll know what might be coming.
Okay, Q is canon, QANON, and Kelly said it's ungrounded news. What does that mean, Kelly? Ungrounded. That makes me think that it's flying about electric. It doesn't ground out. Well, I don't understand what that means exactly.
I have no earthly idea.
And she had one other question while I'm waiting on that.
Okay.
Can a body language professional even be on a jury?
Well, I haven't been asked to, but I'm ready with my, when they ask me questions, I'm ready because I don't want to be on a jury. Because what I got to do is say, when they ask you certain, helping attorneys with what's called voir dire, when you choose, the one thing that I would watch out for is somebody who thinks they know when somebody's guilty. I would be the one to say right out of the gate, yeah, I can probably tell you if they've done it or not. I've got a pretty good idea whether they're guilty or not. And I would say,
oh, I know a guilty person when I see him.
I would say, I know what that looks like. Trust me. I would make a big deal about it. I'm going to get this guy out of here. So that's
what I thought that would work. It wasn't that, but I was asked by a defense attorney that if somebody is testifying, just because they're a police officer or somebody else, you wouldn't take their word over another citizen. I said, well, probably because they're trained and they know what they're looking at. Mm-hmm. And I figured that would get me tossed, and it didn't. They actually paddled my ass.
Well, that might be the question that they want to, that might be the answer they were looking for.
It was a defense lawyer who asked it.
But you're looking for, when you're picking a jury, you're looking for a leader. Who's the leader in there? You want going to want a school teacher, or you want someone who drives a bus, or you want somebody to drive. What kind of person do you want to be the leader? Who's going to be talking to all these other people when it comes time to make the decision about whether that person's guilty or not? So that's you're dealing with a big psychological game of who to pick and choose from that group that you're talking to. So you design questions to find out what's really that person's really thinking about. It's not just like Greg and I are always laughing about the psychopathy test. Whether someone's a psychopath or not. You don't ask questions like, one of them is finding out if the person is glib or not. But you can't say, "Hey, man,
the hair test?"
Yeah.
Okay.
And you can't say, "Hey, are you glib?" Where they can say, "Yes, I am actually. I'm very glib. You should see me. I'm hilarious." You can't. You've got to ask questions to see if they answer that way. And that's what
would be a question or two you might ask. Like, let's say that I'm your resident sociopath or psychopath. What would you maybe ask me to see?
Oh, for a psychopath?
Yeah, if you were just kind of trying to draw it out.
Okay. Well, sometimes that could take an hour or so. Sometimes it takes quite a while. But as you're talking to a person, you can. I really don't want to tell you a bunch of stuff that I would ask. So no, not that I want to talk about it out here, but I would.
All right, well, just generalize it then. I'm guessing giving me every opportunity to self-aggrandize.
Yeah, and you ask things. You do things that touch up on you, that just barely touch that ego. You just almost offend them. You don't want to offend them, but almost brushing up against the offender, or say something that should horrifically offend them if they are indeed a psychopath, or they have psychopath, or if they fall in line of psychopathic behavior. And if they fall into psychopathy at all, they're just way to structure questions. So when you ask, and they'll have no earthly idea you're asking about those specific, those questions you're asking, the way they're set up, they'll have no earthly idea when they answer them, because they'll just be being flippant is one, but you just want the answers to be, as you ask the question, what about so and so? Yeah, I don't, or I do. So it's. I don't want to tell you all the. Not that I want to tell you. After this, I'll tell you all about it. But,
okay. What I figured was that you would probably help bolster their ego slightly, like, such and such happened there, and whoever did this had to be really damn clever to come up with this idea and then manage to get their way around the back, and then see if they react, going, yeah.
You would say almost just the opposite.
Oh, really?
Whoever this is an idiot because they did this, and this. Well, they could have done this. They might add something to it as protecting the ego. That's
okay.
Yeah, it's one of the, because you'd think that'd be the road they go psychologically go down, but it's not. There's a lot that's not happening in the brain, and there's a lot which makes them view the world differently than you and I will. You can't fathom not feeling bad seeing something happen to a little puppy or something, or a little baby, or for another person. You can't. It doesn't. You're like, well, how can they do that? Well, there's nothing in there that makes that part of the brain isn't there. It doesn't function, or it's there and it's not functioning correctly.
Have you dealt with any?
Yeah. Yeah. There's a difference and the big thing is, and psychopathy and people are under the impression there are psychopaths and sociopaths. Sociopaths are just hardcore criminals. They go to jail early and die early. They get stabbed or they stab somebody, those types of things. Whereas a psychopath, everybody thinks they're always brilliant. They're really smart. Well, in reality, a lot of times they're just set up like normal people. Some of them are really smart. The ones that are CEOs are really smart, because that's how you get to be a CEO. You get to be really smart. But the differences are this. If someone is let's say there aren't really, in my opinion, there aren't really sociopaths. They're just mean people, just bad people. Then you have that's where the argument begins. I don't know. Let me start there. You have sociopaths and psychopaths. Let's call them sociopaths. And the sociopath, let's say that's someone like in ISIS, right? When they're little kids, they see their father stomp little babies to death in the street. They'll have their son kill people when he's 7 years old or beat his sister to death, things like that. And see the guy beat up his wife all the time. These horrendous things this little child is seeing as it's supposed to be growing and developing these emotions that make it feel things and be sensitive about that. My mom always said, don't forget, always think about how that person's feeling when you're talking to them. You don't know what's going on at home. You don't know all these things. So as little kids, our sensitivity thing was blown through the roof. But with the quote unquote sociopath, they don't get any of that. They get nothing. All they have is they just see violence and things as they grow up. So becoming part of a violent culture, as in ISIS or those types of things, is nothing for them. That's almost normal. Whereas a psychopath, you can put them in an fMRI machine, and you'll see that their brain doesn't function normally.
Yeah, they're born that way.
Yeah, the amygdala is the two of them, about the size of almonds. They're either missing, they're messed up, or they're just not working properly. So and that's the argument, nature versus nurture. And when they started working with psychopaths that were in prison, to help them get so they could let them go, they were just teaching them how to look normal, and they could never look normal. They didn't know what to do, So most people don't, when they're psychopaths, they don't even know they're psychopaths, have no clue whatsoever. And they find out as they go through.
I'm partially colorblind, and my wife will be like, well, what do you see? And I can see most of the colors, but how do I explain something I can't see? So people say, well, that's a shame. You can't see a rainbow. Like, well, I see a rainbow. It looks pretty. And I may not see all the colors, but how do I know what I can't see, which I've never experienced, which I don't know? Is that a similar scenario? Empathy is something that they've never really experienced and can't completely know.
Right. It's like a blind person. There's a guy, my dad's best friend was Doc Watson, who was a guitar player. And one time we were talking about colors, not being able to see, describing green, what these things said. And he said, it's not that I see. And I was like, well, what's it like when you see black all the time? He said one time, which I thought was brilliant. It's like not having an eye, not being able to see with your hand. You can't see colors that people with an eye on their hand can see. Like I can't see colors you can see. And I was like, and what he was saying is, if there's nothing to see with, there's no way you can see it. So you just have to take what people tell you and use that to the best of your knowledge, what green is and what red is and what blue is and what those stand for. Blue is cold and red is hot and orange is warm or whatever. So, and yellow is bright. So you hear, it's the same thing with, you're right. It's the same thing with psychopathy. It's you're told what these emotions are and you learn about them. So you mimic them and you imitate them. There's a guy, Bill Thesis, his name, and he's living in Canada, working at a fish place, and he's a psychopath, and he's done some horrible things, and he's nobody. Well, to make a long story short, I shouldn't be telling that story yet. Actually, I take all that back. That's just my opinion about the guy.
I'll use another one. James Fallon, Dr. James Fallon, I've had on the show.
Yeah.
He's a professor who was doing the brain scans, and his own brain scan got in the pile. And it turns out that he has that. And he's interesting to talk to.
After watching his videos and after watching him talk a lot, because I started, I'm really up in psychopathy. I don't think he's a psychopath. I really don't. I think he's autistic. I think that's what you're seeing there. And he may be under the impression he's a psychopath, personally, I would push all my chips on no, he isn't.
Well, I've read that autism and psychopathy are similar, or on the spectrum, so to speak, because both involve not having empathy or having problems with empathy. But one is a condition that, people can accept. The other one, not so much.
Yeah. Greg Hartley actually is the one that tipped me off to that, because if you'll notice with a lot of people who have autism, who are on the spectrum, they don't move their eyebrows a whole lot. And I never really thought about that a lot until we were talking to someone and we just started discussing what we thought was up with that person. And he said, it looks to me like autism because they're not using their eyebrows a lot. And I thought, So, and if you look at this guy, he's not using them as much at all. And that's why I first said, holy smokes, he's not using those. And I started listening to what he was saying. And so when you accept what he says out of the gate and say, oh, he's a psychopath, you just accept it and start going on. But if you come from, ask Chase about it, I'm sure, and Mark as well, and Greg, when you talk to him, I'm sure after watching him, they may feel the same way. They may not, but that's what I would bet. I would bet everything that he's not a psychopath. I think he's autistic, and I'm not sure everything he's saying is. I don't want to say I don't know if he's giving us all the information he has. Yeah, I don't know if it's all accurate or not.
Okay. All right. Well, we got more information on Canon, and it's underground news through codes. Deep in the conspiracy stuff here today.
Okay.
Gosia, I hope I'm saying that correctly, has a wiki as Canon is a far-right conspiracy theory detailing a supposed secret plot by alleged deep state against U.S. President Donald Trump and his supporters. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's great. It's good to know what it is.
The deep state thing I find interesting. I do think the term deep state really just refers to people who have been in a position who are lifers in civil service. They're the people who actually make the trains run on time and make things happen. And they're the ones who will be there when the president's gone and the next one comes along and the next one comes along. That's all deep state is. And a lot of those people can't stand Trump. I think that's pretty much common knowledge. I don't think that there's a necessarily deep conspiratorial group or cabal within that is plotting. I do think there's a lot of them that would love to see him fail and probably would do things against him, but I'm not sure if I believe in the whole deep conspiracy. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm so apolitical when it comes to all this. I just, it's not that I don't care, but there's so much that I've got my head in so many different things. I just don't have time to get into, climb in that and look around even, I can take in that information and go, yeah, okay, great. But the last thing I'm going to do is go look into that. Not that I don't think it's fascinating. I'm sure I would if I got into it, but I got a bunch of stuff I got to be reading, I get too much going on where I just don't have time to get into it.
I hear you. Well, we've got Kelly coming back. Watch President Trump with crowds. You'll see signs, T-shirts, and symbols of Q, letting him know that they are there. You just need to watch the video. Say, dig into the elite. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm guessing that they're in favor of Trump ultimately. All right. So moving to body language. And this is a question I was going to ask you as well, because how does one become or get recognized as a body language expert? What advice would you give to someone who has the ambitions to do this? And I did want to push it out there because it's not like there's body language university.
Yeah.
And it's a degree.
Yeah, completely. It's not one of those things where you can say, when I grow up, one kid, I'm going to be a fireman. I was like, I'm going to be a doctor and I'm going to be a policeman and I'm going to be a body language expert. You really don't, there's no school you can go to is the thing. So you sort of have to educate yourself. You have people out there that will, and one of my soapboxes I get on is the person who says, I'm an expert, and they give information that they haven't researched themselves. They have no experience in what they're talking about or training on. And it really bothers me when I see the information they're given isn't very good. So the key is to get good information, and you can get good information from Google and on the internet. You just have to know where to look. If you'll read books by Greg Hartley and Joe Navarro and Mark Bowden and Chase Hughes, if you'll read those books, I promise you, after 2 or 3 of each one of those, you'll know so much, and then you'll realize how much you don't know. Most people, this is mostly body language to most people. Oh, I know what that means. They're not into it. They don't know what's happening. Where it means that maybe, an eighth of the time or a 12th of the time. That's what that means.
All right.
So
especially that one. That's the easiest one because it can
it's
mean they're
classic.
cold, but it quite often is my arms. I'm bored and I'm just putting them here because it's easy to hang the arms on my chest.
Exactly. So. But that's what I would do. I would suggest reading some books by those guys, and because you'll learn so much, and one great book to start off with is What Everybody Is Saying, Joe Navarro's book. That's a great starting place. Then move on to Greg Hartley's books. He's got like 11 of these things. They're all like #1 sellers. He's one of those guys. Chase's book is great. The Ellipsis Manual.
Yep.
That's a great book. That's a great book as well. I've got all these things here, and the one Greg just recently had come back out was I've got over there. It's How to Get People to Do What You Want. And but Mark's book is great. Truth and Lies. That's a great book to get and read. But you can't do all that without. You got to get into Paul Ekman. Unmasking the Face. That's a classic book. He's got the literature you can get that is valid. I just get a Kindle. Spend whatever it is. They're cheap right now. Get one of those, and you get these books cheap. And read those. They're great. So you can learn a lot.
How long did it take you? Now, you learned it from your dads. You sort of grew up with it, but I mean, to set some expectations, because for a while you're going to just be, to me, wildly off the mark. Like I even said earlier, well, I would tell them blah, blah, blah. You're like, no, you'd actually kind of do the opposite. So I'm a typical example of somebody who pokes around at it, but I don't know what I'm doing. What kind of exposure do you need to have to legitimately start to get the knowledge? Is it a good 2-4 years of really reading and practicing?
Yeah, it takes a minute because you can, the thing that happens is like when you first start learning about psychopathy, you think everybody that you know is a psychopath. Oh, so-and-so. I remember the guy from the 9th grade, that guy sat behind me. He was a psychopath. I remember, what's her name? That's my old girlfriend. She had to be a psychopath. Everybody's a psychopath. But when you start, it's the same thing in body language. You think, oh, they look here, so it means something. You look there and it means something. Or they do this with their shoulder and it means something every time. Once you start actually studying the human behavior that goes along with these things, and you can see the differences in those about what happens in this situation when somebody does that in this situation, that situation, then you'll be able to through your big pool of knowledge you have, you can say, oh, I've seen this before. It's like with doctors when they've seen somebody act weird before, but they've seen somebody act weird like that when they had something like botulism and not this thing. Or they've got this and not that. So, you know what? I know you think this might be whatever it is, but here's why I think it might be this, because I've seen this with their experience. For example, I think I told you this, I had cancer, found out. I went in to get my parathyroid taken out, which is para means close to, which is near the thyroid. And so my doctor went in and he's just in there getting that out. And he just happens to look over at my thyroid and he said, something just doesn't look right, but let me just go ahead. We're biopsying this. Let's go ahead and biopsy this. And came back cancer. So I had to take out my whole thyroid, But it's one of those things where after a while, now if I'd just gotten a new guy doing it for 1 year, I'd probably still have my thyroid, This would be one of our last conversations. But having seen those things, and this guy's like the Michael Jackson and Elvis of having your parathyroid and that stuff in Knoxville, Tennessee. And Dr. Overhurl, love you, guy.
Yeah, I hope so.
But after having seen ever how many thousands of thyroids, he's like, I don't know what it is. If something doesn't look right about it, let's just go ahead and biopsy it. And that's what kept me from having a problem with it. Caught it real early. So not even when it looked weird yet. He just thought it looked odd to him for a second. So you have to have experience. You have to read those books and gather that information and expose yourself to it and be careful what you take in. There's that show Lie to Me. And it's Paul Ekman was the guy they talked to and said, hey, this is supposed to be Paul Ekman. Not all of that information is correct. And he'll tell you that too. So you have to be careful about what's presented and don't just take it there's the 738-55 rule that you always hear. Communication is 7% words you speak and 38% the tone of voice and 55% is the rest of communication is body language. That's right. And that's not true at all. Not even a little bit, and it's But anyway, look that up and you'll see. Just look up the 73855 myth, and you'll see what that is. And you'll learn about
it was misinterpreted from what I understand. It was really more about a continuity aspect, that if something didn't feel congruent while people were talking to you, what were the other things that you're going to pay attention to while just seeing it?
Right. It was two different studies that were put together, So that's what the thing is there. And the guy that did the studies, Dr.
I forgot his name.
I never can remember it because people were pronounced with the ah sound when it's really the a sound.
Morabian.
That's it. And yeah, so you said it correctly. So I called him like in the 80s when I first started heard that. I said, what the heck is this? So I called him up. I said, hey, what is this? And he said, no, that's not true. And he explained to me what happened. So every time I heard that, I was like, God, he said, if you get a chance, if you're running somebody that thinks that, straighten them out, or in other words. And I said, yeah, sure. I'll tell him. And everybody still to this day thinks that's true.
Well, while we're on medical professionals, et cetera, Diane Wilbur has a great question. And I think this one's especially appropriate because you learned body language from your dad. What would be your main body language tips for healthcare professionals who are now dealing with patients?
There's a thing I came up with called the patient engagement loop. And it's a little loop that talks about how when you first see when the patient first comes into your office, they see the receptionist. They talk to people there, and then they go in. The next person that talks to them is the person who comes out, the nurse or the physician's assistant, takes them back to the doctor. But before they get to the doctor, they weigh them and do a couple of things, and then they set you up for the doctor to come in. A lot now these days, that patient-doctor connection is being severed by technology. You go in, you got to put your credit card in. You got to talk, you got to fill things out at a kiosk. And the person behind the desk, if there is one, that's the person, that's the key element into what you're dealing with. And to whether your patient ends up suing you at some point. If they get a chance to sue you, they'll sue you. Or if they stay loyal to you and stay your patient. Because these days, the way things are, people are so sue happy. You have to be really careful about how you approach the patient, because they're coming in off the street and they'd love to sue you. And there's a lot of people, a lot of attorneys that would love to help you sue them. So there are certain things you do that you can do and say, have that person when that first in the loop in the first part, which is the going in, how you can help them, show them what to say and do to fire off oxytocin and make them sort of almost bond with that person just by a few words, a few things they say to help them with a problem they have or help them get started at the kiosk or whatever. And then there's certain ways to do that throughout that loop. These days, people are scared to death. They're going to get the coronavirus and die. So it's very important that your eye contact is right on these people, because they're scared to death right now. So in healthcare, it's really important. And doctors are like that. And they want to be compassionate, and they want to help people, and they want to heal people, but at this point they're getting so burnt out from what's happened. They're staying up so late. They're worried they're going to get it because they don't have any masks, all those problems. It's tough for them to be nice to people. So right now you're looking at the group of doctors who are being professionals, and they're helping, thank God we have them. And you have patients who are coming in worried to death. So you've got these two different huge emotional situations happening for both of them, and they meet right here in the middle, and they know they're supposed to. One's supposed to act this way and one's supposed to act this way, but it's really tough. It's really tough to pull that off right now, but they've got to do it. So my suggestion would be as for each person you deal with, I'm not so sure that you're going to be able to keep up the whole, hey, how you feel? I know you're doing good, even though you may mean it, even though they may mean it in their heart. And they really want to help that person and get them better. After a while, I'm sure they're just so burnt and worried about their family, worried about their health, worried about their people they're working with, worried about their health as well. It's a really odd, a lot of odd things happen right now. So mostly just trying to connect with that patient and talk to them and just listen and look like you're listening. You know what's wrong with them. You know they hurt, they're scared, you know why they're there. But if maybe just tilting that head forward a little bit, get that ear a little bit like you're listening, squint just a little bit and shake your head yes, and let them talk for just a little bit. I know there's a lot of people waiting, but if you'll do that and just listen to them, people just want to be heard. They want a doctor to know that they're hurting. Okay, come here, get tested, stick that up their nose. Okay, you go over there. We'll be there. Somebody be within a minute. Hopefully you'll make it. Good luck. Just give them those extra few seconds of listening to them and looking like you're listening to them. So their brain goes, oh, that person's listening to me. And all you got to do is do this and get those eyebrows up a little bit as you're listening. Like, I know it hurts. That makes all the difference in the world. All the difference in the world, especially right now when people just walking in, jamming something up their nose. Thank you. Go on. They've got to be fast. I understand that. But if you can possibly slow it down just a little bit and just look like you listen to it, makes all the difference in the world.
That makes a lot of sense. So you're essentially saying, instead of worrying about reading their body language, focus a lot on how you are projecting your own body language to them. Make yourself more approachable.
Yeah, because we know what the big problem is.
I also thought about it too when you said about taking just that extra second to listen. That probably will save time in the end, because many people, if they don't feel listened to, will get clingy, and you may spend more time trying to break away from the person than if you can connect for that second.
Yeah, they may cause problems. You know, they may be one to cause problems. So,
wow. Well, on this one, and well, we're conducting interviews remotely. Tip on body language cues to focus on when conducting interviews remotely, on video or phone? Phone's interesting.
Yeah. Well, on the phone's a whole other thing, because the phone is you've got to, I talk really fast. My parents will tell you, my wife will tell you, my brothers and sisters say, dude, he talks fast. Because when I get rolling, I get passionate about something. We talking about this subject, body language, I'm all over. That's all I want to talk about. But when you're talking to someone on the phone, it feels weird for me to slow down and start talking like this. But I know that's the best thing to do. So that's the odd part. And so using my mouth, make sure I use my entire mouth sometimes when I talk, even though it looks weird when I'm saying it, and you can hear me doing it sometimes, to slow down a little bit and make sure your diction is as best it can possibly be. You know, that's one of the big keys there. One thing I can sit here and tell you a lot of things to do. And the things to do. Mark Bowden just put a video out about that very thing. And it's about 7 minutes long. And he's got some suggestions to use in there. And as a matter of fact, I'm using one of his suggestions right now.
That posted.
That little smiley face.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and I never thought about that, but he's right, because the camera is up there. And if I keep looking at me as I'm on here, because everybody wants to look at themselves.
Sure.
What you're going to see is this. Hey, so what's happening? But look at that little stick, man. I'm looking right at that little smiley face. I'm looking right at there. So it's a lot.
And you're mirroring the smile.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have mirror neurons. Now there's a big, I don't know. Well, shoot, we'll get into, let me just run this by you real quick. Here you go. A little for some nerd stuff. The mirror neurons are theoretically, when I smile, you'll want to smile, because you're seeing that, and that kicks yours on. You go, or if I go, you'll do that too. You may not do that, but your brain will start headed that way, because you'll want to match what I'm doing, mirror what I'm doing. Now there's an argument that's been going on for a little while that might not be true. And the reasons that those aren't true, I'm not going to get into in depth on it, but I want to just touch on that. That's one of the things I was talking about earlier. Make sure you have all your information about body language correct. Because if I came in here and said, yeah, man, it's all about mirror neurons, and here's how that works. And I'm telling you, and I think it's true from my heart, but it may not be true factually, because when I ran into it, I kept hearing, I was like, I better look into this. This was a long, long time ago. But now lately I've been hearing these rumors and found some paperwork and a couple of studies that show there's a, not that it's not true or it isn't valid, but it's questionable right now. So it's, for me, that's exciting for me, is like to learn about that. I'm so into learn about that right now. It's ridiculous. It's so cornball, but I'm really into finding out about that. So I'll know if I'm giving good information or not.
That's awesome. We got feedback here. It's not a question, but from Rudrani. No question here. As a therapist, leaning in and being present with your client is the most compassionate way to be. Thanks for sharing that.
She's right. That's what she does for a living, though. So she knows all that. Yeah. So she's good at that. But you're completely right, Ru. That you're exactly right.
All right. Well, you brought up some books to your right, and I heard a rumor that you're writing a book right now.
Yeah. I'm writing a book for. It's for Callisto Publishing, Callisto Media, and then right to the working title is Everyday Body Language. So I started that a couple of months ago, and so I think that comes out in August.
Audiobook?
I don't know if there's going to be audio to it, but I mean,
audiobook.
Most likely it's going to be an audiobook.
Oh, well, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. So I don't know if I get to read it.
Scott.
Well, maybe you can do it. Yeah, so I'm working on that right now. It's again, it's the basics of body. The things that I'm talking about are the basics of things.
Mhm.
It sort of starts you from the ground zero and works you through up to not to where it's so complicated you can't understand. There's no complications and complicated things in there, but it just explains the things that we're all thinking about and all wondering about body language.
Let's go. So, is there basic? I just, I don't want to oversimplify it, but are there some basic like building blocks? Like generally, this is this, this is that. Now, there's
Mhm.
obviously nuance you may be missing, but
Mhm.
you can pick up the obvious cues.
Right. Well, like anything else, there are the basics you see, and when you start off with, you see someone, and Joe Navarro puts it so well when he said, "What you're really looking for are the differences in comfort and discomfort, and those changes that happen when you're talking to someone. If they're comfortable, hey, everything's fine, but then as they become uncomfortable, you start bringing up a subject like an interrogation. You start talking to them about something they shouldn't have done, and they start doing things that show you that they have what are called adapters. And adapters, I talk about it all the time because they're one of my favorite things to talk about when it comes to body language, because it's one of the first things you see. That's
That
when
makes sense. It's
they start
stress.
becoming.
So they're trying to
Yeah,
comfort themselves or something
exactly.
because they're now on the spot. Oh, and no, that I never even
Mhm.
thought of. That's a brilliant way to put
Yeah.
it. I guess that's why he's the leader.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's really great, and he's a great teacher though too. You know, he words his things. His sentence structure is is great for perfect for teaching. That's what those kind of books are. Where at the same time, if you'll check out Greg Hartley's books, those are done the same way as well. They're set up to teach you stuff. But Mark's are,
Mm.
and I think about it, Chase's are as well. So I guess the ones who write the best books that way are set up to teach you something. So the person reading them actually, you're not just reading about it and just throwing up a bunch of information on you. You've got to set it up so it goes in and stays in
Right.
the brain. You know.
Well,
So
some
that's
of
what.
it too is I'm a programmer, and sometimes I struggle with concepts, and I have to read like 5 books, and I'll get like a little bit of the concept from one book, a little from another, a little from another. Is it like that, where if you hear it enough times and it's presented with the different angles, you could sort of start to adapt your own
Yeah. Yeah.
methodology?
Well, that's Greg and I talked about that for our course. We have this course called Body Language Tactics at bodylanguagetactics.com. And what we did was this. We for some of them, I'm teaching or I'm talking about what's happening. For example, there are videos are anywhere from 3 minutes to 7 to 9 minutes, I think, at the most. So you can get these little chunks of information that stay. But then what we did was, if I did the video and audio on one, the part you download to listen on your phone when you're out doing something else that you can take with you, the MP3s, Greg would do the MP3 would do the audio for that and his take on it. It's
Mm.
both of us our take on the thing when we're doing them, but it's his take on what I just talked about. So you're getting what I talked about the way I presented it. Then you get this angle over here from Greg telling you about it. So it's really, and you can read about it and you can see it happening. And usually it's like $1,200, but it's on sale now for $39.
We'll put a link in the
So
show.
yeah, during the quarantine. So as soon as the toilet paper comes back, we're jerking it back up to $1,200. So get it while you can.
All right. Got a question
Yeah.
here from Brett Allen. And Brett runs
The
the
open
Open
mic
Mic
podcast.
podcast. Yeah, Brett's a good
Familiar
friend
with
of
it.
mine.
Oh, is he?
Yep. Any
Okay,
tips
great.
to tell if your child is lying and maybe mixing the truth at the same time? That's
Well,
them talking, isn't it?
yeah. Every time they come in the house. Well, there's some things you can when you ask a child a question, they'll look at Ricky Gervais. He does the perfect lying when he's lying about something on his shows that he does. He's studied children lying, and he does exactly what they do a lot of times. As when you ask them a question, depending on the age, how big they are, they'll look away and start playing with something as they answer the question. They'll start. A lot of times people will say, "Oh, the shaking leg tells me something's wrong with that person when their leg is shaking." If they're not shaking their leg and you ask them a question about what were you doing last night, where'd y'all go? And the story goes like this. Well, we went to, let's see, we left the house early. John came by and picked me up. John Shannon came by and picked me up. We went to the store, and then Pa Romano and I went to, from there, he and I stopped and went to the movies. And then after the movies, we went to McDonald's and then came home. Now, if it goes down like that, that's fine. If I'm shaking my leg, if they're shaking their leg the whole time, John came over and picked me up. We went to pick up Power Mono. Then Paul went to whatever. Now, if my leg stops shaking in there somewhere, wherever it stops shaking, that's where you got to keep. Don't say, "Wait a minute, your leg stopped shaking." You're lying. You got to wait. You got to wait, and you just notice about that. And you say, "Well, tell me about Power Mono one more time. What we picked them up." Did you? Well, tell me about that. John picked you up, and then what happened once you got Paul? So you start these little micro interviews where you start picking apart the smaller parts of it. When you see or hear something odd, don't stop them midstream. No, wait a minute. I thought you said so and so. Then everything they're doing when they're supposed to be relaxed because it's your child. You know how you've got a baseline on them. You know how they act. You're going to know their behavior. You'll understand their behavior. When they start acting outside of what's normal for that behavior, which they will do once you say, "Wait a minute, you're lying." And they, what? They'll get in a defensive mode and everything changes. So you've got to keep it smooth. Mm-hmm. So if you have a question about something that's happened and that leg, as you go through, the leg stops, pay attention to where the leg stops, but let them finish the story. If the leg isn't shaking and get to the Power Mono part, the leg starts shaking, then again, there's your spot to start to sort of zero in on, but ease into it. And you'll watch them go from being comfortable to uncomfortable. And you'll start seeing these little adapters and things they'll use. And one thing that Chase brought up the other day when he stuck that at my hind end about getting about what I didn't add to the fear and surprise thing was when people are when they are scared of something, they'll start guarding their arteries and from anything from the wrist, and they'll start guarding those things, which I've never put that together before. That was a huge thing for me to understand, to have somebody say, "Look, man, here's what you're missing," which is another thing we can say to each other, all of us body language people, because we know the other ones want as much information. If I've learned something, I want to tell them. If they learned something and I've got it wrong, they better tell me. If they're really my friends, they, "Dude, no, you didn't. You got this wrong. You missed this, or you should add that to that. You left that out."
It's funny. I was going to bring up Chase too, so his ears better be burning. I don't think he's watching now. He'll have to catch it. But when telling the story, ask them the questions backward. So let them get through the whole story and then start asking the narrative in reverse order. So last thing you did and what you do before that, because when people construct a tale, they've got it in a perfect pattern going forward, but it's very difficult for them to tell the story backward.
Right. Because the emotions are what tie that story together of what happened. So when you start saying, and if you don't say, "Well, tell it to me backwards," you don't want to do that. You want to say, so let me get this straight. You went to the movies, right? And what'd you do before that? "Oh, we picked up Paul." "Yeah, but you picked up Paul, but you did something. Did you drive some?" And you don't have to say the whole question. "Did you drive some?" "Oh, we drove so and so and so and so." So you let them create that part and let them create those sections. Then once again, you go back from the other way and you go back. So you can sort of box them in when you start doing that. You make them create those parts they're leaving out, and you can tell they're creating them by the way by their approach to it. You can tell they'll have inner dialogue going on up there when they're talking to you. Or as you're talking to them, you'll see them sort of separate and start thinking about it. Most people are in the impression when somebody's like this, they're not into what you have to say. But when they start this, a lot of times they're starting to think and they're starting to talk to themselves in there. "Let's see, we did so and so and so and so." And you'll see that a lot with the inner dialogue part with investors. And this is one thing I teach entrepreneurs when they're pitching their idea, their product or their service, whatever it is. They're all, if you ask any entrepreneur who pitches their idea or is good at pitching, you'll say, so who do you, if you're pitching to a group, let's say it's anywhere from 5 people to 12 people, maybe 500 people. That was one of the things we do here in Nashville. And they'll say, "Oh, I want them to be smiling and engaged, and I want them to be looking at me and all that." And I'm like, that is completely wrong. That's not the person you want to focus on. If somebody's going like this as you're talking to them, they're going, they're there because their wife said, "Look, so-and-so's kid is coming in to pitch you something." When you listen to it, and they're like, "Yeah, gee, yeah, okay, I can do that. Yeah, I'll do that." So you're seeing them do it as a favor for somebody. They're schmoozing, or it's for some reason they're there. The person you want to focus on and be the nicest to and start really connecting with is the person doing this. because
And
they've disconnected from you. They're not thinking about you and how they look to you. They're thinking about what they're going to tell their husband or their wife when they get home. I'm going to give this guy or this girl $300,000. Is she going to kill me when I get home? Is this going to work in the next 3 years on these numbers? Right? Is this the person to do this? And they're going to be pulling on their face and messing with their mouth. They're going to cross their legs and their arms, and they're going to get kind of fidgety. That's the person you want to focus on, because they're actually thinking about up here what you're doing and what you're telling them, if it's going to work or if it's not going to work. They're thinking about you and what you're actually saying and giving them and what they're going to do with it. As you build that.
Did you learn this? Because a lot of people don't realize that you're Grammy nominated. I believe you're a producer. Did you learn a lot of this in the music world, having to pitch artists for a deal because I would think that a lot of industry executives in the music world are probably some of the best liars on the planet, or the best at smiling and going, "Oh, that's awesome.
Oh yeah, it sounds great, kid. Come back in 2 weeks. Come here. Let me tell you something, kid. We're gonna make you a star. You understand what I'm saying? We're gonna make you a star." You've got all that going on. Plus, you've got some people who are really good people in there too at the same time. The one outweighs the other. There are very few that are. I've only had, I think, 2 people that did exactly what they said they were going to do the whole time I was in the music business. Only 2 record guys that said they're going to do what they're going to. The rest of them, But anywho, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, so I learned a lot from that on pitch and act, how you can't just go in and throw up all this information on about here's what's going to happen, here's what they do. You have to sort of give it to them a little bit of time, get them interested, and give them a little bit more as they create the picture themselves, because that's the picture they're going to have to pop out of their head and put it in somebody else's head in A&R or the vice president or the president of the label. So you have to give them this picture, even though they've heard the songs or whatever the tracks or what they're going to do. Same thing with the pitch. You've got to give them a picture that's a very tight, concise picture of what you're going to do or what's happening, that they can take out of there and give to their person at home, or the people back at the office, or the people who count, that they're going to need to understand what you're saying. So you're not just getting through to that person. You're giving them something to give someone else. In other words, you've got to keep it that simple as you go along, instead of getting into all to the minutia of the finances. You don't want to do that because you want a meeting with them. If you're pitching your idea, you can go in and pitch and so, what do you think, sharks? Are we gonna? It's not like that, But you want to give them something to. And I know, because I've had 3 people on Shark Tank that have been on there. But yeah, so you want to give them just enough so they want to learn more and they want to have a meeting with you. So once you get a meeting with them, you start that relationship, and that's when things start to really gel. Is when you start connecting with these people. That's the key.
So you're not only body language, you're actually negotiation.
Yeah. And that's what everybody is. You're a negotiator. I'm a negotiator. What time's good for you for the podcast? What about 4? Can't do 4. How about 4:30? Sure, we can do 4:30. You sure? Yeah. And when you and I were talking about this, when I was all set up for my iPad, and this thing wouldn't work on an iPad. I was like, oh no. And I had like 4 minutes, So I was like, can you give me 2 minutes? Yeah, I can give you. Yeah, sure, man. Relax your crack. Well, so it's everything's a negotiation,
Well, speaking of that, while we have an audience, I imagine I can negotiate that you'll have a return visit, and we might talk a little bit about negotiation.
This is one of my favorite podcasts to do, because you always ask good questions. And I know we connect outside of here, but still I always feel like you know what you're talking about when I'm talking to you. So I don't feel like I'm educating you every time we're talking. You see people that are educating the person they're talking to. I don't feel like I'm doing that, because a lot of times I'll sound like I'm doing that, sound like that guy. Oh, here's the way it works in research. And nobody wants that. So I don't feel like I'm doing that. I feel like I'm actually explaining something, as we go along. And a lot of this stuff I already know, so you're asking questions in a good way. So I don't feel like I'm being talked down to. So
cool. Let's roll out with one last question.
Okay.
I actually personally have issues with this question just because of the wording.
Okay.
I would prefer the term persuasion. I'm just going to put it out there. But what would be the best manipulation if you're trying to pull someone in quickly? And again, I would lean towards persuasion or influence versus manipulation.
Right. Let's say we're a narcissist and it is manipulation.
Okay.
So what you want to do is you want to flood that person with oxytocin. You want to tell them how wonderful they are from the top, from the get-go, from the minute you meet them. So as a narcissist or a psychopath, you want that person to feel like you are special. They make you feel like this has never happened before. You and I are kindred spirits. Something's happening here, man. This is special. I like you. I like what you do. I the way you look good, and what you're doing is great. It really is. And they just keep doing this. They keep blowing all this stuff up in your head, and you keep firing off oxytocin, and you bond with that person. And once you bond with that person, that's when they start cutting it off a little, and you start chasing it a little bit. So that's why these people chase those things. So that you always hear, well, you can be so nice to somebody, it seems fake at the top, but man, if you pull it off right, and most of them really do pull it off really well. That guy Bill Thies I was telling you about is a master of that. They you can really manipulate people by doing that. You get them just over, and that's all in a nutshell. I'm not saying you do it every time. It's, hey, you look really good, and I like the way you talk, kid, and all those types of things.
Well, it's gaslighting. Ultimately, that's early gaslight when you're attracting them to it, and then later on is when you start doing the push and the pull and the neg, and that starts to pull the world out from under their feet, and that's when you start getting into cultish behavior. Yeah.
But you have to, to be able to what Rudani's talking about, you have to do it. You have to approach it like we talked about the nuances of things. You have to do it very, like when asking questions about psychopathy, you have to do it in a specific way. And that's the way they do it. That's why they pull it off. It's just bomb you with all that and start taking away, and you start chasing it. So,
well, I hate to take it away from everybody. Folks, if you really like this content, please subscribe. Check it out. Next week, I have Mark Bowden on. His name came up multiple times. Chase Hughes, the first guy who came on, and he will likely be back again. I also have Robin Dreek, who I spoke about earlier, who's a FBI agent, and his job was to essentially recruit spies or assets to give espionage on people. So more negotiation. And I have Dana Ridenauer, who's an undercover FBI agent, which is unbelievably stressful to give up your entire life. And worst of all, be a vegan. I don't know. That's traumatic to me.
Oh.
She had to become a vegan for several years while she infiltrated an animal rights group. So please, everybody, check it out. And thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Scott.
Hey, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you.